Hello and welcome to the 7:30 report. Tonight, homeless children. How do we save those who've already run away from home, and how do we stop more from taking to the streets? And Australians' $21 billion a year habit, gambling, the damage it does.
But I used to fantasise about him getting killed. I would dream, please God, let him get killed on his way home from work. Because that would be an out for me and I could be a respectable widow.
The law again caught up with Peter's stealing. This time he got 4 years behind bars.
First to the National Inquiry on Homeless Children. In Canberra, here's Paul Lynham.
Suffer the little children to come unto me, says the Bible. Well, if you read this report, you're left in no doubt that many of Australia's children are suffering indeed. At least 25,000 of them. The children of a materialistic society in which social and economic pressures have been tearing tens of thousands of families apart. Children sleeping in doorways, in parks, in the gutter. Children facing serious health problems, including the risk of AIDS. Children learning nothing but the bleak art of survival on the streets. After a detailed inquiry that heard more than 300 witnesses in 20 cities, the picture is both clear and horrifying. As one witness told the inquiry, "We are presiding over the creation of a dispossessed underclass, alienated from wider society, unable to afford the barest necessities of life, forced into at-risk lifestyles and crime merely to survive. All this at a time when Australia is generating unprecedented wealth." Shortly I'll be speaking with Federal Human Rights Commissioner Brian Burdicken, who chaired the inquiry, plus David Connolly, the opposition social security spokesman. But first to Melbourne, where Richard McGregor's been speaking with some of the youngsters themselves.
Because my mum kicked me out of home and that, and I just stayed at mates' houses. I kept getting in trouble for the jacks. They chucked me in a lambie.
I was classed as uncontrollable.
By whom?
My mother.
I didn't get on with my mother, and we used to blow all the time, and I couldn't handle her. That's why.
None of these 5 children have a family to go to. None of them have a job, or much money, or much of an education. And all of them seem to look to the government for support.
I don't know much about it, but I just reckon there should be more money, so people can get on their feet and do their own things instead of being all this crap,
Yeah, I reckon they should.
Right.
Because they're the one with all the money, why not?
I mean, while you're not working and that, it's good to have it there, but still, like being a state warden, that ain't much, because I'm on $30 a fortnight, eh? So,
You are?
Yeah, that's all I get from your social worker. And he says that that's all they get, so, I mean, that ain't much.
If they put the dive a bit, I could go out and get my own flat and not be in refuges and stuff. So I don't want to be. It's not doing me any good.
Should you have to rely on the dole to get a good flat?
No, I should rely on myself to get a job, yeah. But, I don't want to do it.
A lot of people sort of blame the government for not being able to survive and that, but, I mean, the government do stuff you around, and, like, the homeless allowance and young employment and that should be sort of made a bigger amount. But I mean, if you want to get somewhere, you want to do something with your life, you've got to do it yourself. You need the motivation. You can't just say it's government's fault, I can't be bothered. You've got to do something with your life if you really want it. It's up to the individual. It's not the government's choice what you do, it's your own.
In Melbourne it's St Kilda, in Sydney it's King's Cross. Every capital city in the country has areas and cultures that homeless kids drift into.
I have never touched heroin or anything like that, but my mate used to be on it. Like, she was only 14 at the time. There's toilets over a park over there. Like, once she got a smack, she didn't care, even if she didn't have a clean fit or nothing. She'd just go and get one out of the toilets over there where everyone used to whack up.
No, but I used to go and do burgers with a mate, and just to get a smoke or whatever and a drink and that, just to give us something to do during the day, And we end up getting caught, getting locked up. And that's not so bad then, because you're not on the street, You come out, you get somewhere to go, and it's a bit better.
So the lock-up's a bit of a reprieve, is it?
Sometimes, yeah.
So you can almost sort of get fit again on 3 meals a day and then head out.
That's right. And then when you leave, you know, you got to leave to somewhere, you know, so you go to refuge.
A lot of people end up on drugs. I mean, you end up leaving home, you mix in with a lot of people that have been there, done that, and then you just start doing it.
Well, Commissioner Burdekin, who are these 20 to 25,000 homeless youngsters and how did they end up on the streets?
They've ended up there because in many cases they're children who've been badly abused. In many cases they're children whose families have disintegrated. People say, why don't these kids go home? In many cases, tragically, there are literally no homes for these children to go back to. In a number of cases, there is a clear correlation between homelessness and poverty. In a number of cases, there are particular problems with Aboriginal children and with children who are from a refugee background. But the short answer is they come from very diverse backgrounds.
And they're not just kids looking for kicks, attracted by the bright lights.
There may be children out there who can be described that way, and frankly we found in our initial research that a lot of people believe that. But quite frankly, if you're a homeless child and there is any kind of loving, caring family there, the evidence shows that they're going to be back there pretty quickly after hitting the streets, because the streets are pretty savage when you're 13 or 14 and you haven't got any income and you haven't got any shelter or food.
Now, you say in the report, homeless children and young people are dying in some cases and suffering horrific abuses of their rights in many others. How horrific?
Well, the right to life is the most basic human right. In one refuge in Canberra, where you're sitting, Paul, 4 children in one refuge that they'd managed to keep in touch with out of 160 they'd dealt with had committed suicide in the previous 12 months. I wish I could tell you that was atypical. That isn't atypical. Many of these children are so alienated, feel so dispossessed and so hopeless that they literally end up killing themselves. But many others are living such appalling lifestyles and are in such bad health and are going to drugs and alcohol as an emotional anaesthetic. And that is ultimately a very big problem for our community as well as a tragedy for these individual children.
You also want more benefits available to these kids, don't you? I mean, more money in their pockets.
The key priority initially must be, if the child can be reunited with the family, then the family is the very best place for any child to be as long as the child is not being abused. But where that's not possible, there's no point in giving children in cities like Sydney and Melbourne and Canberra an amount of money which is simply impossible to live on, because then the problems of crime and prostitution will still recur.
Well, David Connolly, what do you think of the idea of giving them more money?
I'm rather critical of it in some respects, because what I prefer to see is more funds are allocated to help the creation of alternative families. What I have in mind, for example, is there are hundreds of thousands of retired Australians who live in houses with many empty bedrooms. In fact, the average for Australia is 1 person for every house, for 1/3 of our total number of dwellings. So we don't have a problem of accommodation.
Many of them are probably happy to have got rid of their kids, aren't they? They want a quiet life.
That's true, but there's also a fact, and I agree entirely with what the Commissioner said, this is a major community problem. We are not going to be able to solve this merely at the level of government. And if we are going to persist with a mendicant society, and regrettably there are aspects of this report which suggest that by paying out more money we can solve the problem, I'm simply saying unless the community is prepared to face up to this and individuals be encouraged to support charities such as the St Vincent de Paul, the Smiths family and so forth, who do a fantastic job in this area with minimal government support, we are not going to be able to get over this problem.
If you're going to talk about costs, you have to look at the relative costs. And what we've said in this report is that the costs of not adequately meeting the desperate and disparate needs of these children are enormous. We are looking at a problem where there is growing evidence of homeless children becoming HIV positive. 10 weeks ago I was in New York. 1 in 14 homeless children in that city is now HIV positive. Many of them are in such poor health, not only in relation to sexually transmitted diseases or diseases coming from drug abuse, but they're in such poor health that the long-term cost to our social security system of not addressing the issue is going to be enormous. And beyond that...
Some of them will also be virtually permanently unemployed because they're presumably getting no education or training at the moment.
Well, that's a very interesting point, Paul. All the evidence in the inquiry establishes that these children drop out of school almost simultaneously with dropping out of home. The saddest thing about this inquiry was child after child saying to us, well, we're really garbage, so it doesn't matter. Now, until we can give these children the dignity and the worth and the sense that there is a place in our society for them, we will not overcome the problem. I understand that in some cases that will cost money, but we're certainly not recommending in this report that we simply throw buckets of money at the problem. But many of the other things that David said, I agree with.
Paul, if I could just comment that what I'm worried about is too much of a generalised answer. As Brian rightly pointed out, these children start in 12 or 13 years of age. To offer jobs to kids at that age is not the answer. It's fine for kids over 16. Yes, employment is better than nothing, and training is certainly important. But what I'm concerned about is to get down to the roots of the problem. The fact of the matter is we have these thousands of children who have been robbed of their own birthright by callous and indifferent parents. And the only way to solve that problem is firstly to try and encourage parents to do their duty. And the point I keep making is in this society, we ask people to have a licence for keeping a dog, we ask people for a licence to drive a car, and we allow people to go around this country just wrecking the lives of their children.
Commissioner, you say that since the 87 election, the Hawke government's family allowance supplement and those other benefits have lifted about 200,000 youngsters out of poverty. But those benefits are all geared to kids who are within a family structure, aren't they?
Yes, that's the next sentence in the report, Paul. We go on to say that worthy as the family assistance package is, it really depends on children being attached to a family. And the whole point about this inquiry is that we've been looking at homeless children who tragically aren't attached to any family.
And there are still, within and without families, about 440,000 children living below the so-called Henderson poverty line. Is that right?
That may well be the figure. I'm not certain of that, but I know there are certainly hundreds of thousands of children, according to the estimates I've seen, living in families which are generally described as in poverty.
Well, David Connolly, with 44 weeks to go before the end of this year, what then of the Prime Minister's now famous pledge that no child shall live in poverty by 1990?
I think he will wish he never made that pledge, because the sad fact is that since he was elected in 1983, in fact, there's been a decline of 30% in the real disposable income of Australian families. In other words, poor families are undoubtedly much poorer today than they were back 6 or 7 years ago.
The last words of this report are that we are all responsible, and the challenge is to all of us, and that's not trite. That is true. The only schemes that are working well for homeless children in this country are community-based schemes where the community has got involved and these children sense that somebody actually cares what is happening to them. And frankly, you can't deliver that through bureaucrats.
Gentlemen, thanks you both very much for your time.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Well, now from the problems of homeless children to another sad story, but this time with a happier ending. Australians may no longer be the world's heaviest beer drinkers, but they're still top of the list when it comes to gambling. And it's reached an all-time high. Australians bet more often and lose more often than anyone anywhere else. The figures to back that up: we spent almost $21 billion last year on all forms of legal gambling. The social cost of this increase in our national addiction is also on the rise. Broken families, suicides, embezzlement, and jail for those whose gambling habits are out of control. In this report, Sharon Sullivan tells the story of a couple, we'll call them Peter and Elizabeth, caught in a web of compulsive gambling. By the way, Peter and Elizabeth have been disguised to protect their identities.
The first time I knew there was any sort of a problem was when we were dating, and Peter got into trouble at work for taking some money that wasn't his, and he gave me a very plausible tale about medical bills and desperation and being away from his family. And it sounded okay to me, so I believed it. And about 4 months after that, we were engaged to be married. He was coming to take me out to dinner one night to my parents' home, and some rather large detective-type gentleman arrived on the doorstep and took him away, and he didn't come back in. And this detective said that they had been watching his pattern for some time, and he'd been embezzling money from his works, and it was quite a large sum of money, and that they believed he had a gambling problem.
I didn't recognise the fact that I had a gambling problem at all. I thought it was more bad luck.
And yet it had forced you to embezzle from your company?
Yes, it had, but you must remember that hadn't been the first time. That had happened on several occasions before I'd even met Elizabeth. That had been a common character trait of mine for at least 10 years prior to that.
So how old were you when it started?
When I first left school, 17.
How did it start?
Oh, I just went down and had a bet one day. And I won enough money on one racehorse. It was about 3 months' salary. So I was hooked from then on in. I was down there every Saturday.
Many compulsive gamblers follow the same course. It's that first big win that gets them hooked.
Well, finally they caught up with me. Nobody could believe it. Yeah, well, I was arrested. Usual sort of thing, dragged down to the police station. I went to court, very plausible liar. I managed to put a pretty good job over, and I was given a bond. And I walked out of court that afternoon with a bond.
And the gambling continued?
Oh, and the gambling continued, yeah, the next day.
You live in the fantasy world that somewhere along the line you're going to get that big win. And sadly, even if you do get that big win, it usually leads you to gambling even more and the losses mount even further. But it's easy to hide because unlike drinking, for example, when if you're drunk, you're drunk, if you're gambling, it's not going to show perhaps until the bailiffs come to the door and start taking away the furniture.
The lies mainly do most of the damage. At first, you're not aware that you're being lied to, and then you realise that just about everything's a lie, and your whole life's a lie. I was totally convinced that it was my fault, that if I had been a better wife, it wouldn't happen.
I went absolutely berserk with my gambling. I'd go to the tab at lunchtime, put some bets on for the whatever races were on during the day. After work, I'd be back to the tab again, put some bets on for the night, for the whatever trot meeting was on, didn't matter where. And after that, I'd be to the club to play some poker machines. I'd spend a few hours there, about 10:30 I'd leave there, and I'd go to a two-up school.
Where were you getting the money from?
In the end, I was stealing it. There's no other word for it. I was stealing it from my employers.
How many Peters are there in Australia? Professional estimates range from 10,000 to a hefty 100,000 compulsive gamblers. Why the discrepancy? Unlike alcohol or drug addiction, there are no physical symptoms of dependency, and the obsession often goes undetected and untreated.
There's this drive, this urge to keep themselves occupied with the activity of gambling, and they will get restless, irritable, they will steal money, they will avoid doing necessary things like paying the rent in the same way that the alcoholic or drug addict will do these things in order to get the money to keep themselves into the gambling action. Maybe an excitement again.
Dr. Clive Alcock breeds and races horses of his own. He also runs a gambling clinic which teaches people to control their urge to bet.
Now that you're feeling relaxed, I'd like you to take up the next cue, and that's that of being near a TAB. I'd like you to really imagine the scene. You can see the green flag outside. You can hear the noise inside as the Sky Channel brings forward the broadcast of the race. You can hear the clanging of the machines as they punch out the tickets. You maybe experience that urge, that excitement again, but let the relaxation that you're now experiencing overcome that and see yourself clearly in your mind's eye, walking right on by without having a bet. Signal when you feel relaxed with that image.
90% of problem gamblers are men, but in recent months, welfare agencies have been reporting more and more women seeking help. Does Dr. Alcock believe Australia has the resources to provide that help?
No, I don't. New South Wales is a little lucky. There's 2 clinics and Lifeline Counselling. In West Australia, there's a private clinic. And, of course, there's Gamblers Anonymous right around Australia. But in the other states, other than the ones named, there's really nothing other than Gamblers Anonymous. And sometimes people need a little more or something a little bit different to help them come to terms with the problem.
He's doing Daly a favour, breaking and entering and stealing.
Neither Elizabeth nor Peter sought early help. Their marriage crumbled as they found themselves caught in the vicious cycle of gambling, losing, lying, hiding, depression, bills, debts, and more gambling.
I dreaded going home. I didn't really want to go home. And when I was at home, I didn't want to be there.
Did you feel guilty?
No, never.
Why not? You were stealing, you were destroying your relationship. Why didn't you feel any guilt?
Different people have different emotions, and guilt was one that I'd never felt.
To cope, because I couldn't think of divorcing him, couldn't think of leaving alone. If I walked out, then everyone would know I was a failure and my marriage was a failure. So we had to keep up the sham of looking good and covering it up. But I used to fantasise about him getting killed. I would dream, please God, let him get killed on his way home from work, because that would be an out for me and I could be a respectable widow and begin to live a normal life without any more guilt.
The law again caught up with Peter's stealing. This time he got 4 years behind bars. Australians will bet on flies on the wall given half the chance, which explains why we're the biggest gamblers in the world. Whether it's on racing or gaming, Australians spend 50% more than their American and European counterparts. It also goes a long way to explain why we lose so much. 10 years ago, Australians gambled away $1,104 million. Last year, that had risen to $3,385 million. A rise of 35%. And smiling all the way to Treasury, state governments reaped in $432 million in 77-78. But our national addiction had bumped that up to $1,418 million by last financial year, up 44%.
I think that governments need to acknowledge that there is a problem, albeit a small one in terms of the percentage of those people who gamble. They need to provide notices at the sources of the gambling activity, directing people to helping agencies. They need in each state to encourage anybody who shows interest in setting up a clinic or doing research into the problem, and they need to ensure that there's uniform understanding of the problem and the ways of dealing with it right around the country.
18 years after the obsession had first taken hold, both Peter and Elizabeth sought help from Gamblers Anonymous.
Terrific.
It is. It's really terrific today. I've got nothing to hide, so we have no problems.
I really trust my husband now, but I'll never trust the disease. I know I can't be complacent about the disease we live with.
So, are you all over it now?
Today I am. It's always going to be there with me. This is the whole point of it. I'll never really lose it. It's always going to be there. But today I can cope with it, and I know what to look for.
And tomorrow?
I'll worry about tomorrow when I get up tomorrow.
Sharon Sullivan with that look at some of the consequences of compulsive gambling. If you want more information on the help that's available, you can ring Lifeline. Sally Morgan is the writer of My Place, a book that you could call an Australian version of Roots. It's the story of how she discovered her Aboriginality. Sally and her family have been swamped by media curiosity since the publication of the book, but few people know about her artistic talents. She agreed to give this rare television interview to Geraldine Mellett.
This is the work of a woman who can't paint. Notice there's no perspective, that she completely ignores horizon lines, and that her figures don't even have clothes on. Someone whose art simply doesn't fit in. At least that was what Sally Morgan was told in her high school art classes.
It had to kind of be realistic and represent more like a photo rather than an interpretation. That's kind of how we were taught at school. So that put me right off, because I then felt that I couldn't do anything well enough to make the attempt. So I thought, well, I'm no good at that either, I won't do it. And how I got back into it was when I was researching my book, I went up north to Kallawa, and I met an old relative of mine who's the community artist there for Australia Station. And I saw his work and I could immediately identify with his work because he tended to draw the same way as me, no horizon lines, all these little patterns and little birds and animals. And he was very dedicated and committed to what he was doing. And that really inspired me. I thought, if he can do it, I can do it. If he's not ashamed of what he's doing, I shouldn't be ashamed of what I can do.
It's the same style that decorates the cover of Sally's well-known book, My Place. Inside that front cover is a dedication to her family.
How deprived we would have been if we'd been willing to let things stay as they were. We would have survived, but not as a whole people. We would never have known our place.
As another result of the book, Sally's place as an Australian writer and artist is now firmly established.
My grandmother's country, that was taking the viewpoint that my grandmother would have had in the early 1900s to her tribal land and contrasting it with the attitudes that the pastoralists would have had, which was very different because their attitude was to settle the land, to use it for their own purposes. It was more of a materialistic attitude, whereas for my grandmother's people, it was a very spiritual, religious kind of attitude to the land. The black bird in that is very significant because for my grandmother's people, before they die, they hear a bird call, which seems to be common to all of them, and it's the blackbird that I've seen up there. And it's a symbol of death, but it's also a symbol of spirituality, so it's got a two-sided symbol.
Dreaming is a strong tradition in Aboriginal religion, and Sally uses her own dreams as inspiration and problem-solving.
Yes, I do. I don't think I've ever dreamt in black and white. I dream in colour. And so sometimes it comes from that. And I think probably creative people use that kind of dreaming thing a lot because your defences are down and you're very relaxed, and it's a very intuitive kind of process. Other times it might be a feeling I want to express, something I feel deeply about. For example, with children being taken away from women and things like that. Having had children myself, I thought about how I would feel if they were taken off me for no good reason, which is what happened to Aboriginal women, based on a kind of racist government policy. And I thought the feeling of sadness. And then I'd heard a true story of a young Aboriginal girl, I think it was about the 1950s, who'd actually had her newborn baby taken away from her for that reason. The baby was only about 3 days old when it was removed.
And it's that theme of separation that figures so strongly in My Place that's put Sally in touch with so many other stories.
I get lots of letters from people all over Australia, and not just Aboriginal people. I get letters from people that have been adopted, or mothers that have given up a child for adoption or lost a child. And they've all written and said how it's helped them to come to terms with their own grief. So I think those basic human things of helping people through coming to terms with negative experiences is very positive. And also from some Aboriginal people, it has inspired them to go and trace their relatives back. Like a couple of women that were adopted have traced back and actually found their mothers still alive and found they've had brothers and sisters and aunties and uncles. And they hadn't had the courage to do that until they'd read the book.
Sally's creativity seems never-ending. Her art decorates her writing, and her writing provides ideas for her paintings. And for her loyal band of fans, good news. A new book due out in October with this painting on the cover. Beautiful. Tomorrow night, what could be the beginning of a new era for Japan. There are fears even amongst the Japanese that the funeral of Emperor Hirohito could be used as a rallying call for those who want to glorify the role of emperor, worse still, glorify Japan's militaristic past. Till then, good night.